I'm your host, Kate. Welcome to Mental Health and Creativity Collide, where we explore everyday creatives. Whether you're a CEO, a chef, a death doula, or a professional actor, mental health and creativity are gifts we all have as humans. This podcast explores how our guests find balance between mental health and creativity. It is a celebration of their stories and an invitation for us to share our own. Here we go. Hi, Teagan.
Hi, Kate.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being on my podcast this evening.
Thank you for having me on your podcast this evening. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah. So we always open up with just like a really quick optional breathing exercise. So you can either like chill or do it with me or not. It's totally up to you. Anybody watching now or later, you're welcome to join in too. It mostly just helps me center. So if you'd like to join, just taking a nice tall seat, or you can stand if you prefer, lay down. And then inhaling through both nostrils, just nice and slow. And then blocking the very bottom of your right nostril and breathing out through the left nostril, just nice and slow. You can be slower or faster than me. And when you're ready to breathe in through both nostrils again, you're just going to alternate blocking the bottom of the left nostril, breathing out through the right. Continuing at a pace that feels really good to you. It's always just breathing in through both. And then exhaling through alternate nostrils as you go. Seeing if you can let the mind focus just on this breathing for a moment. We're just going to do this for a couple rounds, and I'm just going to be quiet for about the next 15 seconds or so. Slowly going to start to work towards the end, and if possible, you want to finish on the right side, so breathing out through the right nostril, and you can take your time getting there. If you're really in the zone and you want to keep going, you can always pause this, come back later if you like. And slowly letting that go as you're ready. Thanks for doing that with me, Teagan.
Thanks for guiding me in it.
Yeah. So I would just like to start by introducing pronouns. I'm Kate. I'm she, her.
I'm Teagan. I'm also she, her.
Yeah. So Teagan and I have known each other since we were wee babes in the theater in Ohio.
A very, very long time. It is coming up on, it's coming up on 20 years. We're not there quite yet, but we're very close.
Yeah, it's amazing. We still have to figure out how to celebrate. I think we're gonna take.
No, wait, no. Is it gonna be 20 years next year?
Yeah, we're coming up 20 years next year, I think.
Oh my God, 2022 is 20 years. That's absolutely buck wild.
Yeah, it feels like I met you yesterday and a million years ago. I know it's like time is anymore.
The thing I always think is funny about our friendship, because you and our dear friend Emily are my like oldest friends that I'm still close to, and it's so weird for me to sometimes think about relationships like that are so long spanning, because it's like, in a way, it's impossible for me to separate like the person that I am from knowing you guys. Like it's such a weird, because I have absolutely no